So the first thing we're going to want to do is download and run our sample application. Now, I don't actually know where the zip file is going to be, but hopefully by the time this video gets posted, we'll know. And so thanks to the magic of YouTube annotations and post-processing and stuff, I'm going to put it up on screen right now. Okay, so I want you to follow that link. Hopefully there will be a zip file there that you can download. And by the time you unzip it, you should get something that looks a little like this. It's a basic Xcode project. Let's open it up and take a look at what we've got here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do before I even run it is change my bundle identifier from com.example to, well, in my case, com.google. You should change this to something that's more appropriate for your company. I do find that if you change the bundle identifier after you've already run it once, you end up with 2 copies of the game on the simulator, and sometimes it gets confused. So I like to change it first before I even run it. Once that's done, we can run it and check out our game. And we are presented with a fantastic main menu where I get to pick from an easy, medium, and hard difficulty level for the Guess My Number game. I'm going to pick an easy game here, and I get to guess a number between 1 and 100. So I'm going to start by guessing 50, and it's higher than 50. You'll notice that as it tells me the value is higher or lower than what I've guessed, the min and max values here, they tell me what the minimum and maximum possible values could be for our mystery number. So let's see, we'll guess 85. It's higher than 85. How about 92? Higher than 92. Wow. Okay. All right. 95. Got it in 5 guesses. And now it's asking me if I want to play again, and I don't think I will because that wasn't really all that much fun. So we're going to stop this, and let's get a quick overview of this application. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, partly because it's pretty basic, but also because there's a very good chance you are a better Objective-C programmer than I am. So if you find that you're doing something different than the way I'm doing it, don't assume that my way is necessarily more proper or more correct than what you're doing. There's a very good chance that you're doing the right thing and I'm not. And if so, feel free to leave some suggestions in the comments. I'll read those. Just, don't be a jerk about it. So first thing we're going to do, let's take a look at the app delegate. What we've got here is pretty basic. We're creating an intro view controller, and we're creating a navigation controller, and then we're simply taking our intro view controller and making that the root of our navigation controller. We display that on the screen, and we're ready to go. Let's take a look at our intro view controller. We can see here in the nib we've got 3 buttons, easy, medium, and hard, for playing on those different difficulty levels. If we look at our .m file, basically, the 3 buttons here all call Start Game with Difficulty with a different difficulty level. All Start Game with Difficulty does is it creates a game view controller, sets the game difficulty, and then pushes that to the top of our navigation controller. If you're wondering where these difficulty levels are coming from, that's coming from our enums.h file, where we define the difficulty level, as well as a reply enum that simply tells the player whether the guess was too high, too low, or they got it just right and they win. So let's take a look at our game model next. In our .h file, you'll see we have a number of properties here. Game max is the maximum possible value for any game. So in a game where I'm guessing between 1 and 1,000, a game max will always be 1,000. Player min and player max are the minimum and maximum values based on the player's guesses so far. So you saw when I guessed 50, it told me it was too low and that my min and max were 51 and 100. That's what player min and player max are. Num guesses is the number of guesses that I've made so far. Max length is the maximum number of digits that are possible in my answer, and that's based on the game max value. And then we have 2 public methods, new game with level, which simply starts a new game with a particular difficulty level, and player guessed takes a guess from the player and returns one of those reply enums that says too high, too low, or you win. If we look at the game model, we can see most of these methods. New game with level will define the game max based on the difficulty level. It will generate a secret number, reset the player min and player max, reset number of guesses to 0, and determine the max length, again, based on the number of digits in game max. Player guessed increments the number of guesses. It will adjust the player min and player max values as appropriate, depending on what I've guessed, and will return too high, too low, or you've won enum. So now let's take a look at the game view controller. This is probably where most of the interesting game logic is. If you look at the nib, we've got some basic labels, a text field, a guest button, min and max labels, a response label, and a play again button. If we look at the .h file, we really only have one property here, and that's the game difficulty. You'll recall that was set by the intro view controller when we started a new game. And finally, in our .m file, let's go to the top here, we have a number of properties to represent all of the UI elements on screen, as well as a game model and a Boolean to determine whether the game was over or not. Start game calls a new game with level on our game model and resets a number of on-screen elements. At that point, it updates the interface, updates the min-max labels, and basically just preps the screen for a new game. Update min-max labels just updates those labels based on what we got from the model. Update interface based on game over shows or hides various buttons depending on whether the game is over or not. Play a game button was pressed, starts a new game. Guess button was pressed is probably where most of the interesting logic is in our game. We take the integer value from the player's guess, and we'll pass that to our game model through the public method playerGuessed. And then based on the response, we either adjust some of the interface elements on screen, or if the player guessed right, then we say, hey, game's over, and we update our interface. This method here, text field, should change characters in range, replacement string. All this really does is it makes sure I can't enter more digits in the text field than are appropriate for this game. So if I'm guessing a number between 1 and 100, this will stop me from entering more than 3 digits. Touches began with event. This really just makes sure I hide the keyboard if I start clicking on other elements on screen. And view did load sets up our game model, sets our text field delegate to self so that this text field should change characters in range method gets called. So that's about all there is to this application. Feel free to try it out for yourself for a little while. Feel free to experiment, look at what it all does. And when you're all done having fun with this game, which should take all of about 30 seconds, let's think about how we would start adding some game services to this application. And the very first thing we'll want to do is sign the user in. And so we'll start tackling that in the next lesson.